Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Atheniano Show, where each episode is a new ripple containing unknown but unlimited impact. As many of you guys know, if you watched the graduation episode, I'm currently reading this book called Under the Yoke about the Bulgarian resistance to the Ottoman occupation. And I said in that video that I would share some passages and talk about it in future episodes. And as I was reading a couple days ago, I came across a passage that I thought was worth sharing and had some interesting insights. So I'm going to read the passage, but first, for context, I think it's important. I should say the context in which this passage I'm about to read takes place is there is a doctor who gets arrested by the Turkish authorities, and then his friend, unaware of what happened to the doctor, goes into a cafe. The cafe owner's name is Genko, and in the cafe, Genko tells Marco the bad news about the doctor. So, here we go. Cafe keepers are great chatterboxes, and Genko, after the usual obligatory jokes, which he always produced with Marco's morning coffee, at once proceeded to give him an account of the doctor's adventure in the Petkov street and its consequences, interlarding his story with a number of coarse and silly jests. Genko told his tale with much excitement. In general, the misfortunes of others invariably produce a threefold impression on small minds. First, surprise. Next, an internal satisfaction that the misfortune has happened to someone else. And thirdly, a secret and malicious joy. Such are the hidden instincts which human nature conceals. As for Gauko, he had even greater cause for wishing evil to the doctor, the latter having once deducted 12 cups of coffee from his score as payment for one professional visit. Genko had never forgiven him this exorbitant and unheard of charge. So there you have it. The part I want to focus on that kind of caught my attention was this line: in general, the misfortunes of others invariably produce a threefold impression on small minds. First, surprise. Next, an internal satisfaction that the misfortune has happened to someone else. And thirdly, a secret and malicious joy. So, I think, this is something, I'll just go through each of these and tell you my thoughts, because I think this is a really interesting idea. So the first impression that he lists is surprise, right? I think that's obvious. We all, when something bad happens to somebody that we know, or even somebody we don't know that's really terrible, it's like shock or surprise at that thing. And we tend to use that surprise or that shock to produce gossip, right? That's what gossip is all about. We like to gossip about other people's misfortunes or things that are shocking to us, and we share that to others, and a lot of people take great pleasure in doing so. The second thing was an internal satisfaction that the misfortune has happened to someone else. So I think this is also probably true, right? And I think it's something, again, that many of us are not necessarily willing to admit ourselves. But I think when we hear something really bad happen to somebody else, or even just something misfortunate fall upon somebody that we know or in our circle, we're generally a little bit happy that it didn't happen to us. And I think a lot of this kind of stems from this attitude that is present, particularly among people who are very competitive. That, you know, misfortune to somebody else means that misfortune is not happening to another person. Or, I guess more to the point, misfortune happening to somebody else means fortune happening to another. So if somebody loses something, that means somebody else is gaining something. If somebody fails at one thing, that means somebody else is succeeding at another thing. And you see that a lot, or I guess that is even true to an extent in things like sports, like in tennis. If one person loses a point, that means somebody else is winning a point, and there's numerous sports where that's the case. Or even you can say like with jobs, right? If one person gets fired from their job, number one, that means somebody else will take that job, but also that means there's one more person who got fired, reducing the chance that somebody else will get fired, right? So it's kind of like this weird thinking about the laws of the universe, right? That like there's a finite amount of things, and if it happens to one person, that reduces the likelihood that it's going to happen to another person. So in this case, the fact that the doctor got in trouble with the Turkish authorities and was arrested, I guess, produces this like idea in Genko. Well, if it happened to him, then that reduces the likelihood that it's going to happen to me. Now, you could take it the other way, right, and say, well, it happened to him. It could also happen to me. And I think that, like, probably the healthy response is somewhere in between those two, right? A kind of recognition, like, thank God it didn't happen to me, but also a worriness that it could happen to you. And so to kind of be aware of that. But people generally probably fall into the trap of, oh my God, this could happen to me. Oh my God, now I have to be paranoid. Or, oh, thank God this happened to such and such a person. That reduces the chances that it's going to happen to me. And then the third part of this, he says, is thirdly, a secret and malicious joy. And this is interesting to me. The idea that you could get joy from other people's misfortunes. Now, we just kind of talked about that when the gossip, right? People like to gossip about other people's problems and things. So that's a kind of joy. And then we also talked about the satisfaction or relief that such and such a thing didn't happen to you yourself. So that is also a kind of joy. But I also think there's something else happening in this particular instance. Sorry, I was just looking at my notes. And first, I should say, like, this idea that you can feel joy from other people's misfortunes was something I had not thought about or heard about. But I did do a quick Google search on it, and apparently there's a German term for this called Schadenfreude, which essentially means joy from other people's misfortunes. So exactly that. But I think in addition to the gossiping and the satisfaction that these things won't happen to you, a more philosophical point, perhaps, about how we get joy from other people's misfortune is, to me, when certain people, or just people in general, do not have a strong grasp on intrinsic morals or things that are like intrinsically ethical or good or bad. They're not completely certain or really don't have good grasp on that. So they rely on external or empirical things to affirm or deny their impressions about what's moral and unmoral, or what's good and bad, or what's just or not just. And let me use an example to explain that a little bit more. So, in this story, right, it says that the guy who takes joy from telling the doctor's story had an even greater cause for wishing evil to the doctor, because the doctor had once deducted 12 cups of coffee for his payment to, payment for his services. And this guy had never forgiven the doctor for that. Now, I think to illustrate the point that I was making before, in this instance, right, Genko is looking or hoping that there's some kind of external validation for him being annoyed at what he perceives as this incredibly unjust and unfair payment or action by the doctor, right? But he's not completely sure of it. So he's looking for some external validation that the doctor was wrong in deducting this huge payment, and that it was outrageous and unfair and unjust. Because he doesn't know for certain if it's that on his own, or he's insecure about that. And the fact that the misfortune fell upon the doctor gives him like proof, I guess, or empirical proof in his mind that he was right. The doctor did something unjust, because it's like punishment for his actions. Or it's like, oh, see, this doctor is not such a great guy and kind of shady and doing shady stuff because he got arrested. So, see, I'm probably justified in thinking this was unfair. It gives him external validation for his opinions about these things. And this, I think, tends to happen a lot more than we think with people who we just, for some reason, don't like, or have, negative opinions towards, right? Maybe we don't feel great about them, but we don't know why. We're not super certain that they're actually a bad guy or a bad person, that they've done bad things, but we're kind of hoping that it becomes obvious that they are a bad person or have done bad things. So we're looking for external proof to validate our opinions. And this happens with all kinds of people, public figures, with relatives, with schoolmates, whoever. We're trying to find external validation for thinking or not liking them, or thinking that they're bad people, that they've done bad things. So, again, when something bad happens to them, that gives us that external validation that perhaps we were right about not liking them or despising them or thinking they did unjust or unfair things. Now, this wouldn't happen if somebody is 100% certain about what is intrinsically moral or not moral, or just or unjust, or is completely knowledgeable about all of those subjects, and in every case knows, regardless of how they feel about the person, the ethicalness of it. But I think probably none of us have that kind of knowledge. And so a lot of times we try to either supplement or replace that with external proof. So that's what I want to talk about with that passage. I know that wasn't super long, but I thought this was an interesting idea and one that was worth sharing. And I will share more passages in the book as I make more and more progress. We have a great episode today. If you're listening on Spotify, you will obviously hear the rest of this episode. You'll hear about the Mau Mau movement, and then you'll hear me talk about a scene from Rebel Without a Cause. If you're watching on YouTube, well, then you'll have to find those videos separately that I've uploaded to my YouTube channel individually. But they'll be up either shortly before this video or shortly after this video. Also, in other news, we're at 491 subscribers. Again, really want to get to that 500. Very close to monetization. So any help with that would be greatly appreciated. Sharing any of these videos that you're watching with your friends. Much, much appreciated. And subscribing if you haven't already. Also, I announced in the last episode that we're now on TikTok. So if you want to follow us on TikTok, that would be greatly appreciated. The link is in the description, but it's at the Atheniano Show. And obviously you can follow all of the other socials if you like. And if you don't have any social media, as I always say, God bless you. You are doing something right. Kudos to you.